It's time for the Daily Stand-Up Podcast presented by AgileDad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. We had a request from a subscriber, Scott, who asked us about a podcast episode regarding a sprint versus a Kanban. And I think I know what he's referring to here, so I'm going to give this my best jab. I'm going to give this my best shot and see if we can't nail exactly what he's trying to say or what he's trying to ask for. So the first thing I want to say is that these come from two different worlds, right? So when you think of a sprint is a concept that comes from Scrum. It's 2 weeks. It's a rigid, well, I shouldn't say rigid, but it is a rigid time box schedule that work fits into, and we try to make sure that we fill it with the right amount of work. We don't carry work over from one sprint to another. We have sprint planning, sprint refinement. Then we have a sprint demo. So it's a very structured way of organizing work. And that, of course, comes from Scrum. In a Kanban workflow, this comes more from Lean. And the way Kanban works is more first in, first out, FIFO. So items that come in first are the first items to get delivered. Now, there are some rules. You want to make sure you honor work in progress limits, that you don't have too many things in progress at any given time. You should do the same thing in sprints, but that's another story. You also want to make sure you keep things small or extra small in size. You want to make sure that the size of the items that you're working on are small and that you're building quality in, right? That you're focused on quality, focused on making things right, and just pounding through a list. And during Kanban, you're focused on three main things. You want to focus on cycle time. How long does it take to do one of something? Throughput. How many of these things can you do in a day, a week, an hour, a month, right? Whatever the given time frame is. And then, of course, you want to focus on variance and make sure that everything that you're building has high quality. Now, if those things are true, do these things exist exclusive without being one within the other, or can they be a hybrid model? Can they combine? Can we have a Liger, a Tygon? Right? I know it's kind of a crazy word, but I thought I'd throw it out there because lots of people love Ligers. Yeah, it's Napoleon Dynamite. But with that being the case, there can be a hybrid, and a hybrid is often referred to as ScrumBan. So let me explain a situation, give you an example of when something like ScrumBan might work. So let's hypothetically say we have a services-related teams. Let's just call them operations, facilities operations, right? Facilities maintenance, facilities operations, or we could even do a marketing group, marketing operations. Yes. So any group that is a services-based organization, meaning that they're receiving requests or tickets from other parts of the organization to do specific work, and they have structured work they need to do to keep the lights on and to keep things flowing in the workspace. If you fall in a situation where you have both of those, then you could probably be doing ScrumBan. You would handle all of your structured work in a 2-week sprint format, and you would just line everything up, and you would handle all the informal requests and tickets that come in as part of your Kanban board. And the way you would do it is leveraging story points. You would allocate a certain number of points to address the work that you know is certain and allow the remaining points to work on Kanban inflow work-related items. The bonus here is that if for some reason you don't have additional items that you need to work on and everything's good, you can always go and get a head start on the first item in the next sprint, and there's no harm, no foul. Where if you overload a sprint, you may not be getting something done that you promised to do because of the inflow of tickets that come in during that sprint. So my advice is, while ScrumBan sounds ideal and it sounds like heaven, it gives you the structure of a 2-week sprint, but it allows you to allocate story points for certain things. Now, I had someone ask me once, and I guess this might be part of the question too. If I'm doing ticketed-based work and regular-based work, or if I have defects, for example, and regular-based work, do I allocate a certain number of hours? So do I tell a developer, okay, each sprint you're going to spend 7.5% of your time or 10% of your time doing debt-related items, whether it's bugs or defects or whatever the case may be, and the remainder of your time you're going to spend working on everything else. I got news for you. There's not a person in the world out there that works that way. No one's going to sit here and say, okay, how many work days are there in a 2-week sprint? Well, there's 9. Okay, how many hours do I put into productivity each day? 5.896. What is 7.5% of 5.896 by a factor of 9 spread across these days so that I can make sure I'm doing the right amount of work. And I'll set my stopwatch on my desk. And the second it goes, I'll switch and go work on something else because that's the timer telling me I need to, as opposed to, continuing on the defect work. I'll immediately switch, context and jump right over and be good to go. It doesn't work that way. We as humans need time to ramp up and cool down. We need time to dive in and do something. If we're 88 to 90% of the way through something, we're not going to stop because the timer went off. We're going to finish what we started. And I think that this is healthy, right? I'm going to say it again, it's healthy. You shouldn't be trying to live and die by the stopwatch or by the clock. Those teams are the ones that struggle the most. So instead of saying, hey, let's just allocate a preset amount of time per sprint to do things, I often tell people to allocate an entire sprint just to addressing technical debt. Whether it's bugs, defects, whatever it is, just allocate a whole sprint to doing it. But I think the more important part about this is if you're planning for a sprint, knowing that you're going to have tickets that come in and knowing that you're going to have things you have to do, knowing that you're going to have to assist other teams. Allocate a percentage of the story points to that and be good about it and make sure the team doesn't sign up for too much work. I would often tell them, figure out exactly how much remaining points you have and then try to fill it with one less story. That way, if it does carry over, I shouldn't say carry over, but if the points you thought you would need weren't enough for a specific item, you have a little bit of bonus bandwidth. But if you do finish early, no harm, no foul. You can always, like I said, get a head start on a first item in the next sprint, and that'll give you some leverage going forward. And if you finish that item, great, pull it in and take credit for it. If you don't finish, do not pull the item into the current sprint, because then that's giving the impression that the team allocated it for that sprint and that they weren't able to successfully complete it and wound up splitting it, as opposed to they got a head start on the first item in the next sprint because they're awesome sauce. So I think it's important for you to recognize that and to help the teams have some fluidity without feeling like they're being pressured to take on more work than they can. So in sprint, it's 2 weeks, it's rigid, it's filled with work, pre-allocated, and we take on the work as we go. With Kanban, it is more first in, first out, cycle time, throughput, variance, let's get it knocked out. With ScrumBan, it's the best of both worlds. We still have the 2-week boundary for the sprint, so we can make our releases more predictable, but we allocate a percentage of the points towards doing some of that Kanban-related ticketed work. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope that was helpful. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at AgileDad.com. That's what Scott did, and we got right on it. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.